Tonight, we're looking at the role of church in politics, particularly in the run-up to elections. So Zambia has only a few months to go before a general election. What role should the church be playing, if any at all, or should they be impartial and stick to their priestly and prophetic roles? We also look at the question of gifts and cash donations and whether they compromise the church from speaking the truth to power. My guests today are Archbishop Telesphore Mpundu, who is a former Archbishop of Lusaka, and joining him in studio is Bishop Dr. Joshua Banda, who is the presiding bishop of the Pentecostal Assemblies of God. Gentlemen, good evening, and thanks for joining us.
Good evening.
Good evening to you.
Good evening. Thank you.
Since time immemorial, Zambia's churches have played an important role in the country's national elections. And if the past is anything to go by, then this year's polls will be the same. With barely 4 months to go before Zambians vote in a general election, some politicians are crisscrossing the country to make donations to various parishes and churches under the guise of contributing to the welfare of the churches. The Council of Churches in Zambia's General Secretary, Father Emmanuel Chikoya, says it's inevitable that the outbreak of donations during the election year has already started.
The trend is the same during by-elections. People pray and catch up for all the lost time that they've never been in churches, and donations will be given. And so it is clear that such things, under whatever name they are classified, they are aimed at silencing the church. They are aimed at muting the voice of the church. And people argue for or against, but we are on firm ground. So we will not take part in terms of getting the grants.
But what opened the Pandora box in Zambia recently is the debate over the Presidential Church Empowerment Fund, meant to help churches that are struggling financially due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Bishop of Chipata Diocese and President of the Zambia Conference of Catholic Bishops took the lead in rejecting the funds.
As ZCCB, we have taken a stand to respectively decline receiving or accessing these funds. The Church prefers to see the same money being channeled to other needy areas. We are aware that Zambia has a huge debt that needs to be serviced, and the effects of this is seen in the many economic difficulties the country is currently facing. In addition, we have many retirees who have been desperately waiting for their hard-earned dues for many years. Some have since died. Not only that, the Chipata City Council has had close to 9 months of unpaid salaries and arrears. Indeed, inasmuch as we need these funds to run the affairs of the church, we are humbly asking government to consider the aforementioned as a form of empowerment that shall ease the burden of our fellow citizens.
Father Chikoya says that the Empowerment Fund is proving to be a divisive factor, as some churches outrightly refuse to access it, while others have embraced it.
There is a serious attempt for the state capture of the church. And, I see, to use this very strong illustration, it's like a python is coiling itself around its prey. And the prey is playing games, thinking all is well. And the moment it begins to squeeze, that prey would want to get out. But that would be too late. Because it would have been weakened by then, and the next thing is just being prepared to swallow, to be swallowed. But I have hope and I have a firm belief that there will always be a remnant. There are some well-intended church leaders across the divide.
The bigger picture that begs the question is the timing of the Empowerment Fund just a few months before an election, and whether those accepting the money will be compromised.
Okay, Archbishop, I'll start with you. Let's delve right into it and tell us, what are your thoughts to do with this Empowerment Fund and the controversy surrounding it?
I think certain actions must be named by their name. This is naked corruption. It should not be done. Why today, for months and all years, have we come up with an empowerment fund that is at the service of election? Government of the day, it's unfortunate in Zambia, you know, once a political power, a political party is voted into power, they want to stay there forever, which is shameful. Democracy is not like that. So they use every means in order to win the favor of the people and to be retained to power. This is corruption, pure and simple. It should be stopped.
Bishop, maybe you can come in here and tell us what your thoughts are about this empowerment fund.
Well, thank you very much. You see, our position is that there is a place for some of what's taking place, and there's a context in that. And the context is that we have observed since the dawn of COVID-19 that government took steps to try and get into some stimulus actions that would sort of add some life back to ailing sectors of the economy. We are aware of that. And it sort of begs the question to some extent that when some of that began, very little was being said as to whether that was necessary or not. Mm-hmm. I must, however, qualify this and make very, very clear that where we sit as our section of the church, there is no way we can condone acts that would tie our hands or cause us to be mum where we need to speak, because our calling and mandate is from the Lord, and no measure of attempt by any sector of society, including government, can cause us to keep quiet where we need to speak. So that's a given. But this particular set of actions, in my view, in all fairness and objectivity, is one that we have observed. In fact, when the millions were talked about, first of all set aside at Bank of Zambia,
yes,
and then different sectors now were beginning to be given and directed towards particular banking institutions, and people were told how these businesses would be able to access. Some of us were already actually asking questions as to how about the church? So the particular 50 million that's there, that's been given at this point, has its history back to the Copper Belt, where at one time there was a meeting between the head of state and the pastors, and they asked 300-400 pastors, and they asked this very question: how about the church? And that's how that came in, so within context. So rightly speaking, the church is as affected as any other section of the society, and there is a place for that. So there are well-considered reasons why sections of the church, including ours, are thinking that there is nothing wrong. But please keep in mind, the issue of timing when something like this is done is a serious moral question. And if people who have power in their hands choose to maybe do this just to be able to gain favor in an election, we know that God sees those motives. But you see, you can't take away from the fact that there is a need within society, groups and society sections that are run by the church. And that's why later on I know that our friends in ZEC had issued that statement in Chipata, but I also know that His Grace Bishop Dr. HK Banda here in Lusaka issued a statement indicating again that there was room for accepting these gifts. So there are different approaches.
Absolutely. So Archbishop, I'll turn to you now, and for decades the church has been getting grants from government, whether it's for their missionaries, their schools, or the hospitals. Why is it this time that you're raising an eyebrow when this has been happening for decades?
Yes, precisely. We have to raise eyebrows, not just one. Both of those we have. The situation is, there is a lot of cooperation between our churches and the social sector in hospitals, in schools, and so on and so forth. We have channels of cooperation. And by the way, it is the churches that started off with the education of the Africans. Also, medical services, and even other areas like in agriculture. We have a platform whereby we have grant-aided institutions. Then we have our people. The churches don't have, in the strict sense, businesses. They depend on the support of the people. If the government is doing its best to have a vibrant economy, our people, Christians, will profit by that, and they are going to support the church. But why all of a sudden now to change our modus operandi into giving directly, things like that? No, it is not only suspicious, it is, when you say empowerment, it is a euphemism for corruption.
But what about the churches have actually said that they came out to appeal for this help because of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, you see, they needed to be guided. You just don't go and ask for that kind of thing, because tomorrow when the government comes in, they will be very, very excited. And we as church leaders will say, but why didn't you consult us? When you are accepting a gift like that, there are not strings, there are cables attached all the time. So we tell them, be careful, be careful. There are many ways of the government coming in. Why now is the government initiating this empowerment? No, it's very suspicious. And this empowerment is simply a euphemism for corruption. They want a good face with the people, with the electorate, so that we can be elected back. But this is not a clean way of going back to power. It's a shameful way.
You did allude, this I'm referring now to Bishop Joshua Banda, did allude to the fact that the Catholic Church, we heard from the Chipata Diocese Archbishop Lungu, he said one thing, in another breath the Lusaka Archbishop Alec Banda said something else. Is this a clear indication that the Catholic Church is divided?
Well, it is not only the Catholic Church. My belief and my experience is that all political parties in power in Zambia try as much as possible, and to a certain extent they succeed in dividing people, dividing the leaders with the church mother bodies, divided impera. That's how the Romans used to say. When you divide people, then you can go from one section to another, breaking them across your knee. It started with church mother bodies, and then from church mother bodies within the Christians themselves. And this is how it is. One statement is made in Chipata, then another statement is made. The government is it's cheering itself. What a success. It is cheering itself. That is not the first time a public disagreement came up. I remember when I was in the conference as president of the conference. As church mother bodies, we made a statement against the brutal arrests of HH and what followed. We all agreed. And after we read that statement, we heard a dissenting voice from Ndola, and then another dissenting voice from minor clerics. Then from the evangelical fellowship, again, someone came up and spoke differently. We don't see any tension in it. These are all issues of divide and rule. We should detect those things and refuse them and come up once again and say, we stand together. Okay. But this does not always happen, and it's unfortunate.
Okay, I'll let Bishop Joshua Banda come in here now. And still talking about the Empowerment Fund before we move to other issues. So some of the smaller churches especially in the Pentecostal section of churches, that is, leave much to be desired when we look at their finances. There is some mismanagement. Some actually don't have any budgets, and then they receive such a lump sum of money from the government. Firstly, where's the accountability, and do they have the capacity to handle such money, the smaller churches?
Kwangu, the smaller churches. I'm glad you're starting that way, because I think I would like to use this opportunity to really correct an impression. His Grace Archbishop Mpundu has talked about how, in his view, these dissensions happen, and in his view, they're engineered, and therefore maybe government as an onlooker looks on and cheers on. Those things do happen, because if politicians really mean to gain mileage, they can. And we know that in that arena, many times principle can be set aside in order to gain mileage. That's a given. But it's a serious moral issue. And it must be questioned and said for what it is whenever that happens. But I would like to probably come from a totally different angle, in the sense that we not only do these things happen in the background, the media circles, like yourselves, Kwangu, carry a narrative, and that narrative of the way you view the church actually taints and complicates the picture. So that's what I seek to sort of help to correct. You've made specific reference to a group you're broadly calling Pentecostal, because it appears as if anything else that's not anywhere in the mainline churches passes for Pentecostal. I'm a Pentecostal. I've been grown through the Pentecostal church. His Grace Bishop Mpundu is aware that as a young boy I used to be in the Catholic Church, and if you remember when Mary Immaculate Church was opening, we were together and we laughed about that, and the ladies said, "Please come back." Okay. That's just a light moment there. Yeah, but I've grown up that way as a Pentecostal. The Pentecostal section of the church is a very significant grouping around the world, standing for 16.9% of the Christian the Christian community around the world. There are strict Pentecostal groupings, and we have charismatics as well. These are structured arrangements. You have said specifically, with a very broad brush, painting what you're calling small churches as Pentecostal and questioning their ability to actually account. Those realities are there. But let me tell you about this particular empowerment fund. We've been in the sittings with other church networks and church groups where, even as advertised, there are clear guidelines as to who can access the funds and how they are to access the funds. Those guidelines are requiring structures and systems. And those who are unable to be at a place where they can account for those funds are people who are being encouraged to team up with others where their capacity can be built. I'm just responding to this within context, because we must give credit where it is due. And that this is not like just somebody throwing money out there. We've been in those sittings. We have looked at the list of requirements and the requirement for audited accounts and so on. Those are for the churches that have the ability to account, and they have a machinery and they can be able to give out. So a denomination like ours has applied, and we're targeting to be able to get those funds in order to pass them on to many of our individual business people and members within our church fraternity, as well as groups. We've got youth groups, we've got women's groups, we've got men's groups, we've got widows, and so on. All these can be helped to gain access, but they'll do it through the structure. So I just wanted to correct the impression that the idea, Kwangu, is that you in the media need to learn a lot more about the complexities that are in the church, how it is governed, how it is arranged, and desist from using a very broad brush to paint some sections of the church, because that complicates the picture. I just think it's important, and that's why I'm bringing this onto the table right now.
Okay. All right. So now we've seen politicians crisscrossing the country, making donations, and we're moving away from the Empowerment Fund now. And let's talk about these cash donations that we're seeing happening around the country. Do these gifts compromise the churches? And I'll ask the Archbishop that question.
Beg your pardon again, I'm sorry.
No, absolutely, that's fine. I'm talking about politicians who are going around the country making cash donations. And my question is, do these gifts compromise the churches?
No, first of all, I will just go back to whoever is allowing that kind of thing. You see, our country is in a very serious condition morally, as His Lordship has said. First of all, how does that money come up? Look, if today I went out and printed money, and they find out that I have a printing press for money in my backyard, I will be arrested and jailed, and probably I will spend most of my remaining life in jail. But the president does it, and he goes scotch-free. This is a man who has sworn to protect the Constitution and to protect people from illegality. And this is the person who orders printing of money. This is, first of all, wrong. Then, secondly, have we really experienced any nation that goes about distributing money the way it is being done? No structures of accountability at all. So we feel that this is something that is very badly done. It shouldn't be there. And it is meant not for any other objective apart from currying favor with the electorate. And people who are desperate is because of this economy which is deteriorating worse by each day. People will be there to receive it. And they will think this is Jesus Christ coming now to multiply loaves and so on. It is wrong.
Okay.
There are other ways of doing it.
Yeah.
If the economy is supported, so many areas of helping people, our hospitals, almost every other day, there are people coming. But you see, my child has been released from hospital. This is the amount of money we have to spend on medication. Why wouldn't these institutions be empowered to do what they are expected to do instead of allowing politicians going around just giving money?
Okay.
This is unacceptable.
Joshua Banda, I'll let you come in there and talk about these cash donations.
Yeah, on the unstructured cash donations, there we have a concern.
Okay.
And I cannot differ with my colleague, His Grace the Bishop here. And we voiced concern over that. It's gone down slightly, but you do notice that there was a time that even the political parties themselves, including the ruling party, sort of had to issue some warnings to certain people, because you remember it began with people displaying these trunks of money and those videos were going around really recklessly. That again is a moral issue. It is wrong. Because first of all, that kind of flashing of money, one must question what its source is. Is it clean? And it's those kinds of things that I think we must be able to stand up and say no to. Because then the intention becomes very, very clear that it's more than just trying to assist people when they are in need. What we need to do is to not only speak up, but secondly, go further. And in our Council of Bishops last week issued a statement calling upon all political parties this particular time to move away from just mere popularity. Because you see, if we just go with an issue of money, anybody can buy popularity on the ground. This election should not just be about popularity of people on the ground. It must be about character. And if it's about character, then people who are aspiring candidates will ask themselves deep, searching, moral questions. as to how is the best way for me to take my message to the people and ask them to consider me. Definitely dishing out money in a manner that's unstructured and that can't be accounted for is morally wrong.
Okay, but in the past, we've seen an infiltration of politicians in church, and this is for political mileage during a campaign time. And undoubtedly, I'm sure we're going to see it again this year. Why do the churches tolerate this?
Good question. It shouldn't be tolerated. It shouldn't be tolerated. In fact, it should be such, because when they come, usually they will ask to come. Meaning, it's possible to stop it at source. If people just walk into the church, you can't turn them away. The church is an open place. But if they ask and you are able to sense that this won't be an ordinary visit.
Yeah, they come with the cameras, they come with the journalists.
Absolutely, Kwangu. In those areas, I think that it's the discretion of every single leader whose church is visited, when they request and it is thought that they may be compromised, that they say no. So not at this time. Why? Because Kwangu, in the church, we as shepherds are looking after all kinds of people. And they are needy people. His Grace Bishop made reference to that. These are needy people. But they're also people from every walk of life and from every political party. So if there is a push in such a way that it becomes clear, they call you the night before and say we're coming in a delegation of so many, and it appears as if it's really going to compromise your level of judgment or where you stand, I think you have the liberty to be able to say, well, can we do this at another time? We should not tolerate that.
Okay, and Archbishop, you come in there and just maybe comment on this issue as well about politicians infiltrating churches. Is there a threat that the churches can be categorized, for lack of a better term?
You see, unfortunately, your Lordship, Bishop Banda, the situation is not politicians saying where we would like to come. It is, in most cases, deliberately done by our own priests, and in some cases even bishops.
Okay.
They ask with a view of getting that donation. And the president minister does not come alone. They come a team. And these days, we have this social media. Everything is out there. And you see those brown envelopes, thicker than anything. They're like pillowcases, pillows, and so on and so forth. And this is exactly what they are waiting for, to be invited. Don't invite them. If they are Christians, they belong to their own group, and they go to church as members of that particular Christian community.
So what does it say about the caliber of the church leaders then, if this is what they are looking for, to brown envelopes? What does it say about the caliber of church leaders in this country?
I don't know, when you are saying church leaders, do you mean priests or bishops?
Whoever is allowing these politicians to infiltrate in the churches.
These politicians are part of the community. Now, they are supposed to go to church as members of that community, not as politicians. Because for us Christians, His Lordship can support. There is no other place where we are so united as Christians as at church. And that's why we don't want any politics within the boundaries of the church. You go out there. So when that politician in our community comes to church, they're coming as members of that particular church. They're not going to be flashing money. People will say, hey, stop it. The problem is they are invited, purposely invited. And once they get that opportunity, then they come in style. And this is what is happening. And we say, no.
Bishop, I still want to know, these pastors or priests or bishops or whoever's inviting these people, looking forward to this cash.
Yeah.
So, what does that say about some of the leaders?
Kwangu, I would turn the question around. What does that say? Again, I would like to avoid, I would like us to avoid painting everyone with a broad brush.
Absolutely.
I agree that in some cases, they're not just gate crashing. In some cases, they're not just asking to come. And remember, in context, we are discussing those kinds of unstructured flashings of money and so on that just raise questions.
Yes.
Many times they're invited, and I think there should be a balance. Should we stop inviting them? I don't think so, because there is a line, there is a clear line where certain occasions might call for a leader. Yes, I agree, who is part of the Christian community, but who is playing their role, either as king or as a civic leader, because that interaction is there in the many things we transact for society. And there are legitimate places for that kind of interaction. But where I think things could be open-ended and unguarded, and where we, as pinnacle leaders, in this case as bishops, need to give guidance to those whom we lead, is to lay some guidelines on, if you invite a politician to an occasion, and in our case, in our setting, we have guidelines. Here is what needs to be done. Many of our churches normally will notify their supervising bishop when that is being done.
Okay.
And so that there is guidance. Why? Especially at a time like now, when we're heading towards elections, the excesses can be phenomenal. So I really still think there is a balance. There is a place for a proper, well-ordered church function where the role of a civic leader or a king of some nature can actually be utilized to the good, to the common good of society. And I think that is possible. But, there's always a caution.
Okay.
There's an extreme to everything. But I like the Americans say, let's not throw the baby with the bathwater.
Absolutely.
And I'm sort of agreed with with Bishop when it comes to the fact that sometimes these cases happen because people are invited, but then maybe there is some desire for something, and that should be checked. That's wrong.
Okay. Archbishop, so it is believed that the church is the conscience of a nation. Now we're in the run-up to an election. What role would you like to see the church play in the run-up to elections in this country?
The role of the church is that of a prophetic church. And when I say prophetic church, it's in the spirit of not prophetism, but the old prophets in the Old Testament. The prophetic tradition is, unfortunately, most of our Christians don't want to understand that, is a consistent approach, an approach which is not compromising. It is an assault on the leadership, on the kingship, including the filthy rich that oppress people. When you read the prophetic literature, it is consistent. And that's why most of those prophets ended up as martyrs, because they feared nobody. And they stood on principles. Come rain, come sunshine. This is the way I think the church should come in. Not beating about the bush, political correctness, political convenience. When things are bad, they ought to be mentioned as bad. A spade is called a spade, not for something else.
Okay.
But these days, political correctness is what is, up there, very famous. No. When we find something is wrong, we say it. And we say it very clearly, not just like that.
Okay.
This is the role of the church. And when they say church, we mean those people who profess Jesus as their leader across the board.
Bishop Banda?
Absolutely. And let me just add, the role of the church, yes, is prophetic. And it is true that the prophetic means speaking into the situation forthrightly. A lot of some of what we have seen as passing for the prophetic has been from the angle of where people are just predictive And we hear these things from some parts of Africa, and Zambia needs to watch where there are people outside our country who think they have so much interest in Zambia, and there's all these predictions about who's going to die next, who's going to do this, and that's not the prophetic. The prophetic in reality, and I'd like to add, is forthright speaking into the situation, giving direction. Yes, it involved the predictive as well, and the telling of the foretelling of the future, and that's also clear. But the role of the church is also to be pastoral, as well as to be priestly. In being pastoral, the church must stand ready in moments where people are hurting. Look, Kwangu, we're going through a very difficult time. COVID-19 and its impact on our society, the loss of many lives, the economic challenges that we have both referred to here. Those things depress people. Suicides become the result. People are hurting, job losses, businesses shrinking. So the church in the nation, and I agree across the board, going beyond denominationalism, going beyond labels, but as long as they name the name of the Lord Jesus Christ and that Jesus is Lord, should be out there in the community to take care of the weak, heal the wounds. Those who've gone away from the flock must be brought back and help to understand that there is care. That's the pastoral side. The priestly side is where the church stands in a place of to some level, mediation during conflict, but also mediation in the sense of taking the needs of the people, physical, spiritual, and otherwise, and presenting them to the Lord. In the picture in the Old Testament is the church wearing his priestly the high priest wearing his priestly garments, and having around the ephod and the breastplate and so on, having the names of the children of God written there. That's a picture of what we know as intercession, bringing the names of the people before the Lord and praying on their behalf. So in Zambia then, as we look at the elections, the church has to be seen to actually take time to pray. And in fact, let me use this opportunity to say that some of those things we are already doing, more than just the October 18 that we normally pray as a nation.
Yes.
We already right now are looking at a prayer program literally for the whole year. In May we have one event which will take place in every single constituency across Zambia, and that initiative will be launched this coming Saturday. I just need to mention that because that's part of the role of the church. And then sometime in July, prayer is arranged, and in some of that, to help us actually with what we're talking about here, the plan is we're calling all aspiring candidates in their respective locations, and letters are going to different political parties, and there are different discussions going on. So this is something that will be pre-discussed with political parties so that they know, they understand their agenda, learning lessons from the past. We will not use those moments as moments where they declare anything about their manifesto, but they're simply there to be prayed for. That's a priestly role where we pray for the nation.
All right, just before I open the phone lines, just a quick one, picking up on what you said, Bishop Banda. What about social ills in society? Why are we not hearing the church, apart from the Catholic Church? The Catholic Church has always been in the forefront when it comes to talking about certain social ills, such as corruption in the country, or whatever's topical or being debated in Parliament. They're very loud about it. But when it comes to the Pentecostal movement, broadly speaking, we don't hear much of this.
No. Here, Kwangu, I categorically disagree with you. And this is what I mean. The media needs to learn. You need to learn. This idea of giving us the impression we're a divided church, some of it is coming from you in the media.
How is this?
How is this? It's because you don't understand enough about the church.
Okay, that's why we're giving you this platform to explain to us now.
So hear me.
Yes.
Hear me.
Yes.
This business of referring to one side of the church, apart from the Catholic Church, is not just what makes the headlines. We work together. I'm sitting here with His Grace the Bishop. You don't know of the times that we've been behind the lines. Bishop,
Okay.
My Lord, His Grace the Bishop. It's 2016. The things that were going on behind the scenes, which newspapers may never have picked up on.
Okay.
We work together in so many ways. So I think you should, Kwangu, as a matter of approach, desist from giving the impression that there is a divided church.
But that's what we're seeing,
No.
Bishop.
Allow me
That's
to
what we're
finish.
seeing.
Allow me to finish.
Absolutely.
Allow me to finish. The vices of society, you are not there in our many churches. When we preach this, we preach the word, and the word is categorical against the vices of society, corruption. If you read
Bishop,
Jeremiah,
I beg to differ with you. Journalists are also Christians. We're also Pentecostal. We also go to traditional churches. We sit in those pews and we listen to the word.
No.
And it's from this observation. You gave yourself as an example. You were once Catholic and now moved to Pentecostal. I was once Anglican, moved to Pentecostal as well. I've been to various Pentecostal churches, and all I'm hearing is healing and delivery, the prophetic word, prosperity. That's the message I'm getting from sitting in the pews.
Would you allow me to finish?
Sure.
You're generalizing. Have you ever read a man by the name of David Martin?
No.
David Martin is an Anglican. He is one of the leading religious academics in the area of sociology. And he, as an outsider to the Pentecostal grouping, took out a research. And I recommend for you to read his book. It's called The World, Their Parish.
Okay.
That is Pentecostal. He writes about Pentecostals. His estimation, this is scientific empirical data. His estimation that is in the last 40 years, and his book was published about 4 years ago. He said in the last 40 years, there is no single sociological phenomenon that would pass or exceed what this one group of the church called the Pentecostals have done. He did his own research, went around and showed how, and that's empirical data.
In terms of
lifting people out of poverty, speaking in society. Healing must be preached because society is sick, both spiritually and physically. We've got to do that. Sickness is a serious issue in our day and time.
Absolutely.
It has to be preached. So do not belittle
No,
it.
but
No. Allow me to finish.
Okay.
Allow me to finish.
Okay.
So that must be preached. Different sections of the church have been given graces by the Lord in order to make a wholesome body that is able to function. The history of the Catholic Church, as we know, and the church was one before, you know that. You know that.
Yes, absolutely.
So when we look at the trail there, yes, a lot of they went ahead in developing social teaching and a lot of the social interventions within society. But if you look carefully at history, the story is very different now. The church in general, including our very own, he talked about the education sector. You can go now and find, not just in Zambia, but I lead 4,000 congregations in the Southern African region. Right now, we have social programs that have changed in the last 10 months, that have affected over 100,000 people socially. Never made the headlines here in Zambia, but these are people we are touching in these countries. And so you need to be a little careful. That's why I'm saying I challenge you to do a little more homework, because then you will not say, how come it's only them who are speaking? We are all speaking. We read from one word, this Bible. And this Bible is categorical about what's sin, what's a vice. When we come to gender-based violence, when we come to issues of HIV, I'm a Pentecostal.
Yes.
I'm a Pentecostal. I have done my PhD studies in HIV social policy. Our own church runs not just one, but just within Lusaka, we have 30 health posts reaching people, millions of people. And that's just in one sector. We are involved in the education sector. So I think balance this.
Okay, yes.
The
but
section,
how are we going to know this if you're not telling us about it?
I'm telling you now, but
Okay.
it's also your work. You must study, because you cannot make that kind of statement, Kwangu.
Yes,
If you,
anyway.
no, a moment. You cannot make that statement if you were studied enough, because you would have known about David Martin's research, balancing the sections of the church and celebrating the graces. And in this particular case, one hand and the other hand, we celebrate the graces. We've got strengths and we've got weaknesses on every area. But the church
Okay,
is
let me
one.
now, before I move on, I know the phone is buzzing away, but we're still talking on this topic. Yes, you're doing all this work, but my point is, we're talking about the topic today is the role of the church in politics and in the run-up to elections. There are issues going on in this country. There are allegations of corruption. The economy is running haywire. When were you quoted, for instance, talking about corruption?
Maybe not by yourself. You go and search.
I've done my research, and that's why I'm asking, when have we heard you talk about corruption?
Did you see our statement last week?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I did.
Yeah. So when we're talking about character, what are we talking about?
We want you to say there's corruption or alleged corruption, talk about it.
Yes, alleged corruption, and you name it when it's there. Do not paint with the broad brush. You know, on that one, Kwangu,
Okay.
I stand categorically. It is not
Your
right
point-
for you.
your point
My
is
point
taken.
must be taken, and you must do your homework, because we can't just agree with you.
No,
when
absolutely
yeah,
not.
Yeah, no, we
Absolutely
won't.
not.
But when we
Absolutely
see it, we will say it.
So, in other words, you're not seeing it.
But
You're not seeing it.
what do you mean?
I'm saying where I've named the corruption. I've talked about the economy. Where have you talked about these things? So you said you haven't seen it. So therefore you won't talk
Come
about
on.
it. Let's move on.
Come
My
on, come
phone
on.
is buzzing off, and I've only got 7 minutes left.
Yeah. But will you allow me to finish? Kwangu?
Okay, that means there'll be no phone calls.
Well,
So
be
my
it.
producer is
So be it. The Kwangu,
Yes.
I cannot let you get away with
okay.
this.
Make your point, and then we go to the
I
lines.
cannot let you get away
Absolutely.
with this. So the issue is this.
Sorry.
You can't say that we are not talking. You need to understand exactly what I'm talking about. When there are alleged cases of corruption, for instance, we have spoken. If you've not heard that, that's you. Ask people who attend our churches. In the last 7 weeks, I've been preaching about the prophetic. You pick up the tapes from our church and hear what that message is like, the vices we are handling. So these things cannot be said to only be true when they make Hot FM headlines or somewhere else. Not
Okay,
at all.
all right.
So we must put this into perspective.
Okay, point taken. Would you
Absolutely.
like to come in here, or can I open the phone lines? Any point you'd like to make?
No, very shortly. Politics is the greatest game in the whole wide world. See what was happening when the United States was working towards the elections and so on and so forth. And look at our public media, look at the TV. It's absolutely killing. It's nothing else but campaigning and campaigning. It's the greatest game in the whole world. Since it is the greatest game in the whole world, the church must be there.
Absolutely.
The church must be there not as partisan, but as non-partisan
Absolutely.
people, to inspire people and also to name and shame those who are violating principles of good governance and principles of togetherness and so on and so forth. The problem in Zambia is you can't speak about politics unless you belong to, if I can put it that way, you belong to an opposition political party. How many times have I been called UPND and people don't know my political past? When I tell them how allergic I am to partisan politics, they won't believe it. Just because I spoke. As a Zambian, I am a free citizen of the Republic of Zambia, with all the rights of expression, the conscience, freedom of conscience, and so on and so forth. So we in the church must be there as the salt of the earth,
Absolutely.
as the light of the world, as the leaven in the door. So no one should tell me, and that's what they want to do all the time. Oh, you want to become president. No, I don't want to become president. No. But woe to me, as St. Paul says, woe to me if I don't preach the good news, if I don't tell you you are wrong when you are wrong. And that is that. Our Zambian population must learn that. We are still in primitive politics.
Okay. All right. I'll go to the phone lines now. Hello. Good evening.
Good evening, thank you.
Yes. Who am I speaking to?
This is Moffat from within Osaka.
Moffat. Please go ahead with your question or your contribution.
Yeah, mine is a quick one.
Sure.
I have a brother of mine. He's a cancer patient. Every week, we have to buy medicine up to a tune of 5,000 kwacha. And I know a lot more other patients at Cancer Diseases Hospital that are unable to afford these medicines for cancer. Now, my question to Bishop Banda, wouldn't it make a bit more sense if these monies that are being donated to the churches are channeled towards improving our healthcare system, as well as education, for instance, other than where they're being channeled to? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me take another call before we answer that. Okay, Bishop, you can go ahead.
What was his name again? Sorry, I didn't write down. What was his name?
His name Moffat, but let me just take the second call.
Okay.
Hello.
Thanks.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening, Madam. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Who am I speaking to? Chanda.
Yes, ma'am.
Please go ahead with your question or your contribution.
Yes, I'm particularly going to ask the Bishop Joshua Banda. Bishop Banda, you said the government has empowered the church with 60 million kwacha. How far has government gone to alleviate the suffering of the people on the street, especially the blind, people we see begging on the streets, the children, people we just see scrounging for food? These are realities that we see every day, like, for example, as people use the road on foot quite often.
Yeah.
So, to the best of your knowledge, how much has government allocated to street beggars in the same, vein as empowering them, in the work of COVID-19, as it has just empowered the church? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chanda. So, Bishop, please go. Moffat's question.
And Chanda.
Yes.
Yeah, Moffat, speaks a matter that is very real. I've been to the Cancer Diseases Hospital in just the past few weeks because we've had a patient who needed to take some tests there, and they're still in hospital right now. So the reality he talks about in terms of the expense of medicines, their availability or non-availability, in this case more non-availability for those, especially for these terminal diseases, those are not readily available. So that's real. And he asks a question, wouldn't it be better for the money that's being given to the church's empowerment to be directed there, while agreeing and understanding the reality of that issue? I must say, this is the reason why. If you heard me at the beginning, when the first 10 million was announced as being amount of money, right at the start, if you will, of COVID-19, and as being set aside by Bank of Zambia, and we began to hear sectors being mentioned, honestly speaking, I already told you, some of us began to ask some questions as to, okay, what's the appropriation level? So the valid point here should be not just the question of the 50 million. By comparison, you know that is much smaller than what other sectors have gotten. We should really take the question right back and say, could we, as a nation, through our representatives in government, have done better in the kinds of allocations and appropriations and timing of the same? My point at the beginning was very clear. Definitely this could have been done better. So I caution against us just overdoing it on the 50 million, because this has been on the tail end, and that's why the issue of timing, we are agreed, that is a concern. But it does not take away from the fact that it still is meeting a need there. But I agree with Moffat that if we did our appropriations better, not just for the 50 million for the church, but for the entire stimulus package that was announced I don't know how many months ago, probably we could have been able to see some of that go into these very, very strained sectors like the health sector. And it could make a difference for a patient of mine, for a patient of Moffat's who is needing. So that's well taken.
Okay.
And secondly, which goes back to the question of Chanda, when you talk about the people on the street. I think it's the same issue. It's an appropriation issue. And I agree with the fact that if, for those who sit in making these decisions, the desire is to time this in such a way that it advantages them in this way or the other, then you will see that there may be a disparity in how that's channeled.
Okay. All right, I'll take another call. Hello, good evening. Hello? Hello, good evening. Okay, we don't seem to have that call on the line. Okay, I'll just take one more call and then we'll have to wind up. Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, I hope your radio is turned off. I'm getting a bit of an echo there.
Oh, I've done that.
Fantastic. Who am I speaking to?
We are speaking to Dr. Mwanga.
Dr. Mwanga.
Pastor.
Pastor. Yes, please, Pastor, go ahead with your question or your contribution.
Thank you. I think one factor we must look at in relation to church is that the church must be truthful, honest, and our job literally is to preach the gospel. And we should never be compromising any man. As a church, like the bishop and a bishop was speaking about the where he calls the spirit, which is right. But in regard to empowerment, it's just unfortunate that it came at a time when there was this epidemic of COVID-19. When you go outside this country, you look at America and other countries in isolation, they have done the stimulus package. So that one, the only issue maybe should come to that it has come to the churches. But even the churches, we should remember that churches are also persons who belong to the community. We should also receive that we're also affected by the same. But maybe the comment should be maybe the final outcome. Because when you look at the President Edgar Lungu, when he went to the Copper Board, the church leaders were they were requesting why also the stimulus package can be extended to the churches, and that's how it came and so let's also do that, and because it was through the request.
Okay.
But the one thing I can agree is the bishop when he said that maybe people should consult one another and find out whether this thing is doing problem.
Okay, Pastor Mwanga.
It's a very good gesture for the empowerment when you look at it.
Thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gentlemen, I'll just give you 30 seconds for closing remarks. We've just gone over our time, so I'll start with Pastor Joshua Banda.
Well, first of all, thank you, Kwangu,
Bishop
for the
rather.
opportunity. That's all right. Thank you for the opportunity. I think that I would like to state again that the role of the church in an election year like this one is very crucial, but it's also just as crucial any other time.
Okay.
The church must remain non-partisan and maintain its prophetic, pastoral, and priestly role. And the church is the hope for the nations. And I believe that that's the same for Zambia. And God has given to the church the ability to be able to be there to help preserve society. And in this particular country, Zambia is very fortunate to have a strong, thriving church. May have its issues, and we handle those, but no one anywhere is imperfect. We believe that the strength of this church, historically, the church in Zambia, across across the denominations remains Zambia's most critical and most enduring assets, and we want to make ourselves available because Jesus has mandated us to do so.
Thanks very much. Archbishop, your closing remarks, please.
No, I'm appealing to our population in Zambia. The church is there to stay, but you have also to accept the fact that as church, we have to be in politics and don't just put us in the sacristy. I begin from the sacristy to go out to the people.
Yeah.
So don't call me, you are a politician. Yes, I'm a politician. Only I'm not a political politician. I'm a non-partisan politician. If the political powers that be recognized that, I've been stigmatized, and I don't mind. I would not die even if they kill me. I don't mind. What I'm saying is, politician. No, I have to be there myself as someone representing a group of people that says we have a role to play in society. In this case, if only the government had recognized our role as a church, and I'm talking about across the divide, because the politicians also divided us among us as leaders, much to their credit, but it is a very doubtful credit because it boomerangs. They would have asked the churches, church leaders, we have an idea to come in and make a difference with the people who are suffering. How can you contribute to this effort? It would have appeared as a genuine effort instead of simply trying to buy votes. This is how it is now. The church leaders would have said, look, we have certain areas that need to be looked into, not just retirees. What about the people who are still alive in hospitals? What about our children? What about those people who are begging, who are sleeping outside? And there are not so many. They can be helped. But this role is not recognized by the government because the government is afraid of the church. They're just afraid of their shadows. Here is a church that is ready to work with the government, but not ready to be bribed.
Thank you very much. Very interesting discussion, gentlemen. It's been eye-opening. Yes, different sentiments, but yeah, fantastic. Thanks very much for coming on the show. And that's it from Beyond the Headlines. Join me next week at 18:30 as we delve into issues that go way beyond the headlines.